An icon of 20th century, macho and bravado, a surprisingly sensitive soul, and one of the literature's most appealing, repulsive, and intriguing characters, Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway was also one of the finest novelists of all times. Hemingway's life was dramatic, driven by ambition, and marred with blood, despite his relatively short lifespan. True love, in my opinion, may ever be able to stave off the inevitable. To struggle to love and to be incapable of doing so is to struggle with two sides of the same coin. Stress and violence in childhood, she wanted twins so badly that she became obsessed. Her desire was fulfilled when she dressed up tiny Ernest to look like his sister, whom she referred to as her beautiful Dutch dollies. The little boy his mother had called Ernestine favored the masculine roles. As a young man, Hemingway saw the outbreak of war in Europe in 1914. He enlisted with the Red Cross in France before joining the United States Army in 1917. And he drove an ambulance throughout his service. In July 19, while serving in Italy, Hemingway was injured by shrapnel from an Austrian mortar shell, which marked the beginning of his spectacular climb to literary prominence. His time in Italy greatly influenced the writing of A Farewell to Arms, one of the most acclaimed works. Even if you ask someone to imagine Hemingway in Paris when it was at its peak, the city probably wouldn't have come to the mind. Hemingway lived in the city during the events of his last novel, A Movable Feast, which is a fantastic evocation of the era. A lot of notable locals made fast friends with Hemingway and his first wife, Hadley Richardson. Gertrude Stein, Ezra Pound, Pablo Picasso, and James Joyce were among those mentioned. His marriage to Hadley ended in 1927 when she learned of his romance with fashion writing Pauline Peffer. Finally, Hemingway and Peffer divorced and Hemingway remarried Peffer. Pauline and Ernest Hemingway uprooted their life and come to Key West, Florida in 1928. Mutts and cats that lived with their aging owner, the paternal Hemingway tourists go to Florida to see the Hemingway home. Pauline's uncle Gus made the first purchase of the landmark home on Whitehead Street. When visitors first arrived at the Hemingways' extravagant mansion in the 1920s, they were greeted with many of the same pieces of furniture and artwork that still decorated the home today. Hemingway's descendants, the six-toed mutant tomcats, may live here, along with the artifacts from his travels in a quiet spot to write. In 1937, Hemingway went to Spain to cover the Spanish Civil War for the North American Newspaper Alliance. It was a brutal struggle between the governing Republicans and Franco's fascists. He had to help out and help others out. Hemingway was accused of working for the fascist side because he helped pay for the transport of ambulances to Spain in support of the Republican struggle. He fell madly in love with his future wife, Martha Gellhorn, shortly after meeting her. Hemingway married Martha after his traumatic divorce from Pauline, and couple settled in the house outside of Havana. Abrupt Conflict to Hemingway. Throughout the 1960s, Hemingway experienced a dramatic deterioration in his mental and physical health. His paranoia and anxiety worsened to the point that he sought treatment for them at the Mayo Clinic, where he received electroshock therapy. Not much changed, which is unfortunate. On July 2nd, 1961, Hemingway took his own life after suicidal thoughts continued after further therapy at the clinic. Hemingway had written 7 books, married 4 women, served in 3 wars, and been in 2 aircraft accidents at the time of his death. He passed away and was buried in Ketchum, Idaho, but his legend as a guy whose life was more spectacular and dramatic than anything he wrote about wasn't told.